Is your family farm's future uncertain? Silence may be the biggest risk of all. Discover how open conversations and gradual planning can secure your legacy and empower the next generation. Don't wait. Start the dialogue today. Learn more and download a transition planning checklist at fcc.ca/knowledge.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun, Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, of course, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. I can guarantee you this. It's Friday. We will have a bonus segment as RealAg Issues Panel will go into the OT section of the show with the bonus. And we've got a great panel today. We've got Kelvin Heppner, of course, from RealAgriculture, as well as Evan Shout will be with us. He's with Maverick Ag, farmer coach, as well as host of the Truth About Ag podcast, which I always listen to and really enjoy. Evan does a great job with that podcast, which is distributed through the RealAgriculture.com, plus our YouTube channel, and across all of the different podcast platforms. We got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Farm profitability took up a lot of the oxygen in the U.S. and in Canada this week. Do we need to have stronger ad hoc programs to backfill and make up some of the difference for farmers on some of the losses? There's yields in places like Western Canada. That doesn't mean profitability. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some of the trade things that happened this week as well. We got to talk about this ostrich farms. The Supreme Court of Canada granted a stay. Those 400 ostriches, you thought they were on death's door. They are still alive. And what comes next in this saga that has really taken up a ton of oxygen? I've gotten so many emails about the ostrich situation and people on like diametrically opposite sides of the opinion pendulum on it. So we'll talk about that as well today. Controversial it is. If you have any feedback on, wait a minute. We've also got a beef market update with Ann Wasko as well today. So that's going to be a great time. Love having Ann on the show and to get some perspective on what's going on in the beef market. I got a bit of a pullback in prices this week. Is there a signal there? And I'll break it down for us. If you have any feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back, we're, of course, going to have Ann Wasko from the Gateway Livestock Exchange for the beef market update. We're going to do that when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio on the last Friday in September. Back right after this. Time for a product spotlight with Jared Vaness, National Technical Service Manager with BASF Canada. We're going to talk about bringing to the market Liberty Amp. How did you identify the need?
When I started my career, 2001, we were looking at improving Liberty. This has been a need and an ask from the market for nearing 25, 26 years. It's a bulky product today, Liberty 150 is. There was always a need or an ask to get it more concentrated, but not lose efficacy. We finally got there in time for the 2026 field season. What we continually ran into and why it took as long as it did is we will not sacrifice on efficacy. At the same time, it's going to be 20% higher in concentration and maintain that superior weed control for consistency and dependability in the field, which is critical. Essentially, get more performance per drop. You reduce the number of totes and drums, and it helps from that logistical standpoint.
If somebody wants more information on the launch of Liberty Amp, where do they go?
agsolutions.ca.
Important update from FMC. Precision Pack DB878 Pro herbicide is now registered for use in front of oats, along with spring wheat, durum, winter wheat, and barley. DB878 Pro herbicide delivers proven kochia control, including herbicide-resistant biotypes, plus extended control of cleavers, dandelion, narrow-leaved hawksbeard, and volunteer canola. And with Precision Pack herbicide customization, you get the acres you need. No leftovers, no wasted time. See your local participating retailer today.
Well, it's time for the beef market update here on RealAg Radio. Hey, with deep roots in agriculture, MMP helps farm businesses make confident financial decisions. From planning to growth, their advisors are here to support your success across the country. Learn more at mmp.ca. Well, let's get into the beef market update with Ann Wasko of the Gateway Livestock Exchange. And how are we doing on this Friday?
I am good today, Shaun. How about you?
Pretty good. Well, it's the last Friday of September. Can you believe that?
I can't.
Brutal.
Yeah.
Where'd September go? So we are into the fall run. Let's get a bit of an update here. What's going on with cash prices?
Well, cash markets did their typical, or have been doing their typical September seasonal slowdown when you talk about wholesale prices and fat cattle prices, and let's update that. So that theme continued. Lindsay and I talked about that even 2 weeks ago, and that theme has continued. So in the U.S. this week, in the South, our fed cattle market was $237. That's $2 to $3 lower than last week. And in the North, $232. So you're seeing that North-South switcheroo in terms of South premium now. But that North market was $4 to $6 lower. And dressed in the North, we were $365, down $5 from last week. So that was kind of how things finished. What led the pack was that cutout, that wholesale price, Shaun, the choice cutout, closed last night at $372. That's $14 lower than last week. It's now lost 10% since the start of the month. That's that's still within the range, but now it's the market usually loses anywhere from 5 to 10% from August highs and cutout to the September or October lows. So we're kind of right at that level. So we would be expecting that to catch, if you will. And the select spread was 18.50 back from that. So pretty typical choice select spread. In the Alberta market, really quiet, Shaun. I think, with Packers now, because of that lower cutout, we've got Packers back in the red. So they're losing money. They've cut back on kills, not showing near kind of appetite to own cattle. And that was really clear in Alberta this week in terms of really very limited bidding going on. And so when we're talking, there hasn't been any trade yet. I suspect there could be by the end of today. But just for a refresher, last week, the dressed market in Alberta was 520 to 525 delivered dressed. So that Canfax average came in at around 312 if somebody's wanting to keep track.
Yeah. And
the other little point that we'll see what kind of impact this has as we go forward. But the Canadian dollar just here in the last 24 hours has closed under 72 cents. And we haven't been there for a little bit. We've been really hovering closer to 73 in a bit. So we'll watch that one going forward. So I haven't got the greatest, fed cattle wholesale news to give you, but it's kind of seasonally typical, if I can say that.
Yeah, we're just not used to people saying prices went down. We're just not used to that, Ann.
I guess so.
We're on a rocket ship here. What are we doing?
I guess that's it.
What kind of impact is the screwworm issue in Mexico having on some of these feed yards that would be more reliant on Mexican feeder cattle? Like what's happening? How is the market?
Yeah, well, let's talk about. So last Friday, USDA had their September 1 cattle on feed report. So we'll talk about that. But then let's also talk about what happened this week in terms of the volatility on the futures market, in terms of the news we got early this week of another case of screwworm much closer to the U.S. border. But first of all, the report last Friday, we called it neutral because it was pretty much on track with what the trade was expecting. But those numbers were on feed. September 1 down 1%. August placements down 10%. So now we're at the 5th month of consecutive smaller placements. Those were the smallest placements since 2015. And August marketings were down 14%. Again, you can see the slowdown. Cattle are staying on feed longer. There's not aggressive marketing. The swap to buy feeder cattle to place them is poor. The numbers aren't there because of the lack of imports. So there's certainly some signs showing up and have been showing up for the last few months in terms of the smaller placements when you start talking about 1 million or 1.25 million fewer feeder cattle coming from Mexico. But the news this week, certainly with another case much closer to the U.S. border, 70 miles south of the U.S. border, set the markets on a flurry on when the news came out early this week. But then by late this week, yesterday and today, we're seeing markets back off. Again, back to this news of wholesale prices down, cash market down. But long story short, talk about volatility in the futures market. The December live cattle market just in 4 days had an over 800 point move up and down, or $8 a hundred, however you wanted to say it. And November feeder cattle had an over $14 move up and down. So it's volatility at extreme levels with a lot of this supply unknowns around us, especially around the whole screwworm discussion and issue.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem like, early in the screwworm saga, there was, opening, closing. Right now, it feels like the door's shut, like we're closed.
Yeah, this last case, I really think the markets took it that way, Shaun. I guess we'll see what USDA does, but certainly the markets took it that way in terms of, okay, this looks like it could be a longer term situation rather than just, in another month or two, the border might reopen and those flow of feeder cattle could start moving north. So we don't know, Shaun. I guess that's the bottom line. But the market appears to have taken the stance, okay, we're going to be short on supply for a bit. So we shall see.
Well, speaking of the supply, there's always talk in the U.S. and in Canada about when will we start to rebuild that herd? And there was talk this week, kind of a start and stop in regards to Secretary Rollins talking about potentially incentivizing ranchers to retain heifers. From a Canadian perspective, what are the numbers kind of showing? Is there indications potentially that more females are retained?
Yeah, I think there is, and I guess I would just say to start off those comments would be, you give the operators profitability, the cow-calf operators profitability and some moisture, and they will do their job. I guess that would be my message in terms of if you want to get things started, that's what needs to happen. Well, profitability is happening in spades. Some areas have had better moisture than others, so that's why I think it might be kind of a regional change in terms of heifer retention. But we are seeing some numbers. I just wanted to go through these. So far this year in Canada, our steer slaughter is up 2%, heifer slaughter is down 15%, and our cow slaughter is down 7%. And the U.S., very similar trend. The U.S. cow slaughter could be one of the smallest in history, potentially here in 2025. Canfax, when you look at their on-feed report that they put out every month, year to date, we've got heifer placements in terms of Western Canadian feedlots down 8%, whereas the steer counterparts are only down 2%. So there's a lot of those kind of numbers that are supporting that move towards some heifer retention happening here, and I would suggest likely the same in the U.S.
Okay, well, it's such a long cycle. Like it's not like poultry where the supply can turn pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'll tell you in 2 weeks. Yeah, exactly.
Beef is just way different. Way different. Okay, and really appreciate you joining us here today for the beef market update. Have yourself a great weekend. Happy grilling.
Okay, thanks. You too, Shaun.
Okay, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio for the RealAg Issues Panel. Evan Shout and Kelvin Heppner standing by right after this.
Anniversaries are a time of reflection, celebration, and connection. 10 years ago, G3 set out with a vision to build something better for Canadian grain farmers. And you joined us on that journey to launch a new national network. Thank you for the relationships that made it possible. A decade of growth, a decade of connections, and more in decades to come. Connect with your farm business representative or find your closest elevator at g3smarter.ca.
We have the financial tool you're looking for this harvest. An APP cash advance from Canadian Canola Growers Association offers short-term farm financing that gives you the flexibility to sell your inventory when the time and price are best for you. Borrow at a low interest rate of 0.25% below prime with your first $250,000 interest-free. Apply on over 50 commodities. Call our experienced team or visit ccga.ca. Cash advances are made under the Government of Canada's Advance Payments Program.
Built on over 100 years of seed innovation and unwavering commitment to farmers, Pioneer 100 Series canola hybrids deliver a step change in yield performance and agronomic traits. This isn't just better canola, it's different canola. Pioneer 100 Series. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100series to learn more today. Let's get rocking here with the RealAg Issues Panel here on this last Friday of September. Up first is Kelvin Heppner coming out of Altona, Manitoba. Kelvin, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here. The sun is shining here in southern Manitoba. The wind is blowing, and combines are starting to roll in some soybeans around here.
Yeah. What are you hearing on the yield front? Still pretty strong?
Yeah, there's some good yield potential. We've had some more white mold than I can recall in this area in the last 20, 30 years. So it's what's the saying? Mold means gold. At least there's potential for it there. Maybe not in the market side of things, but in terms of the yield monitor, yeah.
Feels like feels like a saying that could go epically wrong if misinterpreted.
Yeah, that was terrible.
also, yeah, that's a good one. Also joining us is Evan Shout. He is with Maverick Ag. He's with Farmer Coach, Truth About Ag podcast, which we proudly distribute here through RealAgriculture. Hey, Evan, how are we doing?
I'm doing well, except as Kelvin mentioned, the combines are still rolling, and it's almost ticking over to October 1st. And for our area, that is not ordinary.
Yeah, we yesterday on the show, it was Daryl Franzu was on the show from Glasgow, Saskatchewan, and Daryl pointed out, to be done harvest here, at the end of, before October, feels epically weird based on his location. I guess, what have the yields been like over in your parts there, Evan?
Yeah, I won't say this too loud because obviously this isn't Canada-wide, but we're enjoying some pretty good above-average yields. Now, if the markets would, as I always say, yield does not mean money. So let's slow down a little bit on how good it is, but the yields are doing really well.
Yeah, and you've written about this. I know this is something you're pretty passionate about. Is when we're looking at the KPIs of the farm, our financial goals for the farm, yield is something that we strive for, right? Because we know that yield times price equals revenue. But just because the yields are above average doesn't mean we're going to see a whole bunch of black ink when we get to the income statements this year.
No, I would say this is a very dangerous position to be in. And the reason I say that is that as farmers, and you mentioned, Shaun, we like to play in yield. We see it in the combines. We see it on the scale carts. We get to go to Coffee Row and we tell guys, we get to hear the yield around the area. And for some guys, this is the first year in the last quite a few that they've actually grown a decent crop, because we've had drought, let's be fair.
Yeah.
But the thing we got to be very cognizant is, with the markets the way they are, I've got guys who are 20% over their yield budgets and they're 20% under their actual total budgets, because yield is not a financial metric. And if you're budgeted for 60 wheat at $8 and you're getting 80 wheat at $5.50, you're actually in a worse position. Plus you're going to have the carrying costs and the logistical costs and everything else of shipping this. So I think guys just need to be cognizant of that just early here, is that I'm getting phone calls on, we need an extra combine. We need to do this to get the crop off because it's the best crop I've had in the last 5-10 years. No, it's not, unless you booked everything real early this year.
Yeah. Kelvin, it's a little bit of an example of where, thank goodness the yields are there, right? If we had these prices and the yields weren't there, we've got an epic crisis situation.
Yeah, a lot more red ink, if even more than there is in some cases already. If that was the case, thankfully we above average yields, and it's not everywhere, but it does seem like there is above or average to above average in much of Western Canada. Ontario's had definitely has some challenges in terms of what the yield monitors are showing there. And we also have quality issues too. Sure, the yields are strong, but I think there's a lot of variable quality that will put some onus on marketing and different approaches to marketing. I know on our small grain farm here, we just finished our canola yesterday, battling with it, and it was starting to sprout in the pods. So now we're dealing with some very minorly sprouted canola in the bin and figuring out what to do with that. And there's been rain at harvest time here, late season precipitation that leads to quality issues in a lot of different crops.
Yeah, and we have parts of Ontario, like you said, that are getting yields that they, definitely on the poor side, especially on the soybean front, concerns about corn as well. We heard on yesterday's show on the Farmer Rapid Fire, brought to you by Pioneer Seeds Canada, we heard from Ryan Barrett. Now, he's in PEI, and honestly, I knew it was dry in the Maritimes and Atlantic Canada. I did not understand the significance of it. It's a brutal situation. I think he said since July 1st in PEI, they've had like 3 inches of rain. That is like 30% of normal, I believe is what he said. So that's a brutal situation and not good for potato production there on the island for sure. I guess, Evan, there's a lot of talk right now in the United States about ad hoc programming. Probably the probability, if you had to guess, I would say almost 100%. There's going to be some sort of ad hoc programming, especially if you listen to some of the things that President Trump said yesterday in the White House. Is that something that should get more discussion in Canada or avoided altogether?
You're setting me up here, Shaun. It's a double-edged sword with whatever I say here. Who do I want to piss off today? But
joys of the RealAg Issues Panel, believe me.
Exactly. I'm not a fan, and the reason I'm not a fan is everybody I've talked to, and even in the U.S., like ad hoc payments literally go back into the farm and they go back into investment and they go back into land prices. And I've been told that by numerous farms in the coach program and farms that we consult with. So do I believe that farms are in desperate need of some repair with the tariff issues and all that through Canada? Yes. But my biggest fear is that we get a payout and all it does is continue to drive our land prices up and continue to drive bad decision making and lending and more equipment and all those bad management factors. And to be fair, I mean, we're talking about above average yields right now. Yes, the pricing is down, but it's farming. It's a business. We still have loss scenarios. We still have profit scenarios. If I'm in any other industry, and I realize they have ad hoc payments in other industries as well, but we always go to the handout, and I would rather see that money go towards, and I'm sure Daryl had these talks with you, and infrastructure, that stuff. That's where I want to see the money go. I don't want to see it go right into the producer's hands because I think that actually makes it worse going forward.
Now, Kelvin, the capitalization of the payments, like Evan just said, there is, Farm Doc put out I think it was actually the paper was released yesterday, confirming exactly what Evan just talked about. It goes into land. Now, some would argue, though, if it stabilizes land prices and prevents people having to be forced to sell land to create cash flow because the bank's calling, if we stabilize land prices with those payments, we're preventing this situation going epically 80s like. Is that a reason to do it, or what are your thoughts there, Kelvin?
There's a fine balancing act there that policymakers need. Well, and in many ways they don't have enough information or good enough power, I'd say, to actually and we don't necessarily want them to have that power either, but that's a fine line to walk before you get to that tipping point. I agree totally with Evan's perspective in terms of it gets capitalized and it's not sustainable. You can't, unless we build it into our farm management approach that we're banking on lobbyists achieving ad hoc payments indefinitely or whenever times are tough. It's not sustainable, and you shouldn't be building your business plan around ad hoc, counting on these ad hoc payments. And so the fact that it gets built into these models to me, it's not healthy in the long run, because at some point the tap will dry up and then we have an epic collapse. To me, in many ways, you're creating more risk of that collapse or that cliff arriving whenever the government deficit hawks step in and say, hang on, we can't continue spending like this. And at that point, what happens to land values if everybody has built their business models around government support payments in the meantime over years?
Well, here's the reality. Sorry, go ahead, Evan. Go ahead.
And I was going to say, we just got to be careful, because I mean, I've got lots of clients who've lived through the last 5-6 years of drought, and they've had to lower their costs. They had to do that managerial side. They had to do lean management. They had to control their business in order to survive. Now, those guys going forward, assuming we can grow average crops and they can get out of the drought scenario, they're where farms should be today. They've controlled their costs. They've survived without huge ad hoc payments. They're ready to make profit. We need to learn how to farm again. And I'm not saying that in a negative way, but we need to learn how to not just rely on the land values to be our source of wealth. And that's what we've done for the last 10 years is the land has driven the majority of wealth in this industry. We've already had the 10X. That one's not coming again. We're not going to get another 10X. So we need to go back to the fundamentals of controlling costs, lean management, production. Because we still complain that prices are no different than 20 years ago. And you're right, but we're producing twice as much grain. So, I mean, we got to be somewhat cognizant that we as farmers have actually done ourselves a great service of learning how to grow more grain. We just need to control the other side of the pendulum.
Yeah.
It's not about yield. It's about managing your costs.
Yeah. And focused on the operational excellence.
Yep.
That's the piece of it, not the come of the land price and the balance sheet, right? So if you're there's a bunch of different financial statements. It's, the balance sheet can look great, but the actual operation side can be terrible, right? And so it's focusing on that operational excellence. But Kelvin, I suggested not too long ago on this show about, putting some money into, skill development when it comes to financial literacy and risk management. I felt you guys kind of laughed at me. Isn't that kind of what we need?
Yeah, but I'm just not sure. Well, Evan can definitely speak to this. That's his realm that he works in. But how do you incentivize that? If people want to learn, you can't just dangle a small carrot in front of them. There has to be good reason for it. And the people that see value in it, I think already do. So that's where I'm not sure how effective that type of incentive into education would be. But Evan can.
A long tail.
This is the world that Evan works in a lot.
Yeah.
Well, and let's be fair, when the government used to have the ad hoc payments for the education and stuff, there was huge uptake. Farmers just don't see the ability to, or want, or see the value add of paying for it themselves. And that's where, as Kelvin said, we need not just 5% of the industry to believe in continuous education and skill development and not being complacent and getting better. And it's a really hard sell right now, especially when times are tough and costs are going to be high. And so asking them to spend another dollar on something that is not a tangible asset sitting on their front lawn, that's a really hard sell these days. And it's much easier sell to the industry, to be fair, because I think the industry sees what's happening and what's coming a lot more clear than a lot of the production side does.
Hey, don't miss the Prairie Oak Growers AGM happening Wednesday, December 3rd in Saskatoon. A full day of expert speakers, research, and insights capped off with a keynote from Simon Keith. There's also evening entertainment by YouTube sensation, the Peterson Farm Brothers. Day passes start at $40. Register today at poga.ca. That's POGA.ca. We're back with more of RealAg Radio and the RealAg Issues Panel right after this break. Is your family farm's future uncertain? Silence might be the biggest risk of all. Discover how open conversations and gradual planning can secure your legacy and empower the next generation. Don't wait. Start the dialogue today. Learn more and download a transition planning checklist, your guide to farm succession planning at fcc.ca/knowledge.
Whether you're running a farm operation, in a career within an organization, starting your own business, looking for your dream job, operating a company in agri-food, or want to hone your overall life skills, this conference is for you. Celebrating over 10 years of bringing women in ag and food together, join the Advancing Women Conference in Niagara Falls on November 23rd, 24th, and 25th. Visit advancingwomenconference.ca for more information and to register.
Hey, with deep roots in agriculture, MNP helps farm businesses make confident financial decisions from planning to growth. Their advisors are here to support your success across Canada. Learn more at MNP.ca. Okay, we got the RealAg Issues Panel. Evan Shout of Maverick Ag, farmer coach, also host of the Truth About Ag podcast, which you can find at RealAgriculture.com, and our YouTube channel. Evan does such a great job. So many great. Who's our upcoming guest?
So we got a few. We got Ken Seitz from Nutrien coming on in the next few weeks.
Nice.
We got Richardson. We got a few others that are going to be a surprise to some big ticket names. Let's put it that way. So, nice. And then you got the usual suspects of Mr. Klippenstein and Christian and all the ones that don't want to hear us speak that much anymore. So
I had Clipper on the most recent episode of the Mind Your Farm Business podcast. I like talking to him. He's always got a lot of interesting stuff to say, and he sort of sits back, almost like he should have a cigar in his mouth. And Shaun, let me tell you how it is. Like I love that about Clipper.
I love the negative comments I get after those ones, because he is not afraid to speak his mind, and that is why he's a mentor of mine, because I love that.
Love it. It's great at the pub after a few drinks. It gets even better and spicier. Also, of course, Kelvin Heppner with RealAgriculture. Okay, Kelvin, we've been talking about farm profitability and government assistance and strategy and farm management. It's a timely topic for these times. Continue the conversation here from the commercial break.
Well, I'm just going to repeat what you said during the break and what I tried bringing up on the show a couple of weeks ago when I got called a Debbie Downer about it, and that is failure. Maybe we need the fear of failure instilled in this market, in this environment as well, and that's certainly a motivating incentive for farms to cut costs or to figure out how to best navigate this profitability situation, and that's something that it of course leads to many difficult conversations. And nobody likes to see rural communities become ghost towns or anything like that. But sometimes economic reality we have to make adjustments to be sustainable in the long term.
Yeah, we were talking about how the farmer shouldn't judge yield. Like profitability and yield are not the same thing. But governments look, they kind of sometimes look through the lens here. Their KPI is number of farms. And is that the right KPI, Evan? Is like, I don't know. I get why we do that, but maybe that's not real.
How come every time I come on here, Shaun, you try to put me in a corner?
That's what a good host does.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I get a lot of negativity for this, but 189,000 farms and 2% of them own 60% of the actual grain acres in Canada. So yeah, they use our own numbers against us, and some guys won't like me saying this because they are still all farms. I will give that 100%. It's just that when we talk about all the KPIs that the government uses, whether it's sustainability, whether it's, how many guys are using the technology, all that stuff, the majority of acres are doing it. The majority of farms are not. And that might be due to cost and scale and all that stuff. But you're letting the government use our own numbers against us, and it makes us look like we are not profitable or we're not pushing forward and we're not growing as an industry. And we are. It's just only a very small percentage. And that's the dangerous part. And as Kelvin said, with some of our ad hoc payments and our programs, it actually rewards everybody the same. And I'm not sure that's the right sentiment, because we are holding back an industry in certain aspects at certain times, and no other industry does that. Every other industry has free market of, you need to make profit, you need to grow, you need to be better managers, you need to cut costs. And we've allowed farms to not have to follow those rules. And then when times like this come, and 2026 looks to be the same, all of a sudden we're like, well, no, now we're in trouble. We need more payments. And it's a hard fight to have. And there's two sides to the fight, and I get it, but it's a really hard fight for somebody not in the producer realm to understand why we do what we do.
Well, hey, you know what? And one of the other things here too, we always talk a lot about how we got to get more people into the industry and, try to attract more, new thoughts and new ways of doing things. And it's about the young people. Well, there's a lot of people also that believe that some of this programming creates more of a barrier for somebody to be able to even enter the industry at all, right? Because if people aren't flushed out and people aren't leaving, then it's hard for new people to actually enter, and and so it creates this that's an issue as well. It's a very fascinating topic, and I'm sure everybody has some very strong opinions. You can always send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com.
Send it to Shaun.
Yeah, please send it to Shaun.
Yeah, well, I appreciate thoughts on all sides of this, because there's definitely some emotion to it. Hey, Kelvin, one of the issues we saw this week was very concerning, and because of the integration and the how the supply chain works for beef, having screwworm in Mexico, a case 70 miles from the Texas border, is it's. We talked about the beef market update a little bit. It's concerning.
Yeah, it's getting closer, and I think the reality that it is likely going to continue moving this direction, at least in the short to medium term, is setting in the U.S. industry and North American cattle industry. Like you said, it's highly integrated, and so what does that mean for the beef market? And can speak to this with a lot more expertise than I can in terms of if that border remains shut for a long time, what that means for U.S. infrastructure that is dependent on cattle fed in Mexico coming north. It's and it certainly looks like a file though that Secretary Rawlins and the U.S. administration is taking seriously, and they have acted, throwing money into investing in this reproduction facility for the flies that are needed, the sterile flies that are needed to push this thing back down south. But that looks like more of a medium to long term solution to it. And in the meantime, there could be some more pain.
Well, and a part of that too, she was pretty strong language, quite critical of Mexico's efforts on a couple different fronts, whether that has to do with the fly facility, or maybe that's, how are they monitoring their own border, cattle coming up through Central America. I agree with you. This is a file for Secretary Rawlins where it feels like she's more on top of, like, she's in it. Like they are very, very concerned about some of the potential outcome here. And there's a Canadian part to this too, because it is an integrated market. If something happens to the beef price because of some sort of case in the U.S., that works its way right back to Canada. You don't have to have a case in Canada. The fact the U.S. has a case will have impacts on the price that Canadian producers are getting for their animals. Indeed, yeah. So it's not good. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, tying this to our previous conversation, it's certainly a tale of two worlds right now, too, in terms of crop agriculture and cattle operations and the profitability there. Some recent data, too, just showing that gap is as wide as it's been in decades, maybe ever, in terms of what 2025 looks like in terms of bottom lines between cattle operations and crop operations looking at U.S. data.
Well, yeah, and the KC Ag Outlook Forum was this week. Secretary Rawlins did speak at it along with a lot of other economists, and that point was very well made. And there was this rumor floating around. It came from a USDA press release, is how it all started. There'd be some sort of program in place for it, incentivizing financially ranches to retain more heifers. Rollins shut that down in Kansas City. I couldn't imagine, based on the money that is being made at the ranch level, that there'd be any justification for taxpayer dollars to be paid to ranches to retain females. That just, I'm glad she squashed it, because that would pretty much go over like a lead balloon. But Evan, with all of this, whether it's disease outbreaks or financial concerns, whatever this looks like, this is a really epically difficult time for bankers to sort some of this stuff out. There's a lot of numbers being crunched.
Well, and I like that you left me off the policy discussion. Thank you, Shaun. I can jump in on the financial side real well. So, yeah, the banking side, I'm getting phone calls already. Let's be fair. They are not usually too far from the field when it comes to knowing what's going on. And from every indicator we're getting is, again, cattle, great, awesome. And we're reading U.S. studies where it's actually throwing the expectations of of agriculture receipts. It's like the census data. It doesn't mean much because cattle is propping up the rest. So, in Canada, I think we're going to see the same thing. As cattle, still great industry to be in, but the grain side is going to have outcomes that aren't quite as beneficial on the banking side. And we're going to see restrictions. We were already seeing it last year. And we're coming into this year, and as going back to our yield discussion, they might be telling them right now during harvest time that things are all good and we're flowing through to next year and we're going to be in a good spot. I think all the bankers already know that what the commodity prices are sitting at, and they've already started asking guys for fall updates, and they want to get a true picture, because I was sitting in a bank meeting the other day. They've been asked for more bulge financing this early in the year than they've ever had, which means that guys know they're going to be holding grain. They don't want to sell into these markets. They've got bills to pay. the banks are going to have to find operating credit. And we've seen that with the canola advance and the increase in the interest-free portions. Like, the Band-Aids are already starting.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it's going to be, if the prices come back, you can tell me I was wrong 6 months from now and I'll be happy because it probably benefits me as well. But right now, I don't believe we're a 6-month Band-Aid. I believe we are 12 to 18-month Band-Aid. And for guys sitting on bulge financing, it's just going to make it worse. You're just paying more interest costs and carrying costs.
Well, the market's just putting so much weight on China buying
100%.
showing signs of wanting to buy U.S. commodities. And that just, it doesn't seem like that's coming to fruition very quickly, or as quickly as the producer wants to see it, Kelvin. But, you know, Senator Marshall out of Kansas this week, he was at the Ag Outlook Forum, and he talked about the fact that trade is not a panacea. You know, it's about biofuels and domestic consumption. That needs to be talked about more. So on one hand, you have the White House saying, "Hey, bear with me. These trade deals, you know, the tariffs are going to produce buying of commodities, and things are going to turn around." On the other hand, you got senator pretty close to the orbit of the White House saying trade's not a panacea. Like, I am a little bit confused.
Yeah, and that is certainly a concerning message, and we're seeing more talk of this with China's population growth slowing and all of that too. China over the last couple decades has kind of been it has been the silver bullet to demand issues many times, and we've built industries and supply chains in North America around that demand. And if we're going to decide that we're not chasing that anymore and other things take a priority in terms of national security or other political topics, then that means major changes again for North American agriculture.
But I don't like falling on the fear aspect of it, but when was the last time we had pulse, oilseed, and cereals all looking at a bad commodity outlook right now? Like, usually we have one savior, you know, one niche crop, one type of crop that we can sell now and hold the rest. We're looking at something we haven't seen in many years. We're looking at 3 different types of crops across all of Western Canada, and everybody wants to hold all 3 because right now the markets, I mean, there's no bid on a lot of lentil markets. Like, let's be fair. This is new territory for a lot of farms.
So
it's a great point.
To this,
not good, but it's
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, terrible result. Good thought. This is, I think, one of the things that is lost in a lot of this discussion. You know, to Evan's point, a lot of the U.S. financial situation in the farm gate is not because of tariffs. It is not because of some sort of trade war between the U.S. and China. The market sucks because if it was all about that, you know, the U.S.-China trade war, then other markets like in Canada would be fantastic. But they're not. And so we're in a situation where we have low commodity price. It's a global market. We have low commodity prices in a lot of different farming communities around the world. It's not just a U.S. thing. And so I think sometimes that is sort of lost here in this discussion, Kelvin.
It's both, though. Tariffs are not helping. Tariffs are like China is. It's not the Chinese administration is intentionally choosing to buy South American soybeans, not soybeans from the U.S. because of the geopolitical factors back and forth. So yeah, it's not just the tariffs. Certainly, I agree with that. We are in a supply heavy market in most commodities, but the tariffs make markets less efficient and add costs where there aren't costs otherwise.
Yeah.
Well, and I think some of it is we've got our heads so tied into the tariff side of it, whether it's China, whether it's U.S., that even on social media and all those aspects, all we do is we blame that. We look at that. But I think we need to have that realization, guys, that this may be we might be entering a bit of a down cycle here because, as you said, that's not the only cause, and we're seeing all the commodity markets take a plummet. All of a sudden, we need to start figuring out what to do, not just blame the tariffs and thinking that if we fix this, it's going to come back and everything's going to be rosy.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a plan. I think from a strategy standpoint, we need to start planning for these prices moving forward for a while. What do we do? Like, what on the farm gate side, what do we do?
Okay, we get to the break. You're listening to RealAg Radio and the RealAg Issues Panel. Evan Shout, Kelvin Heppner, Shaun Haney back right after.
Ever hear that good things come to those who wait? Well, we think it's more like great rewards come to those who book their Invigor hybrid canola early. Through the Invigor Book and Buy Grower program, you could earn a $30 per bag rebate when you book all your Invigor needs by November 14th. Speak with your local retailer about eligible hybrids. Terms and conditions apply. Book early. Come out ahead.
Dairy producers wanted for the first American Dairy Expo, November 5th and 6th at the Champlain Valley Exposition in Vermont. Grab a free breakfast, tour the 200 Company Dairy Innovation Trade Show, meet Olympian and dairy producer El St. Pierre, and take in the Dairy Delivers classroom. November 5th is Dairy Fest at 4 p.m., featuring a massive dairy buffet, live entertainment, and industry networking. Full details, discount coupon, and pre-expo tickets available at AmericanDairyExpo.com.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio, here for the RealAg Issues Panel on this Friday. Evan Shout of Maverick Ag and Farmer Coach, as well as Truth About Ag podcast. Also, Kelvin Heppner of RealAgriculture, based out of Altona, Manitoba. Kelvin, there's a lot of controversial topics. Maybe the most that I've received, I don't know how many emails this week about these ostriches, these 400 ostriches in this farm in British Columbia. Edgewood, I believe, is the town. And the Supreme Court got involved this week. I guess, what does this stay mean? Is the life of these ostriches still yet to be determined?
Yes, I'd say it is. The court is going to determine whether it will hear the case. And in the meantime, that's what the stay issued this week was basically saying hold off on euthanizing this flock that tested positive for avian influenza at the end of last year. And hold off on. So CFIA, along with law enforcement, RCMP officials, visited the farm this week with warrants, and they seized the animals in preparation to cull the flock, as is Canada's policy and as has happened with 540 some farms across Canada over the last couple of years as part of this ongoing high-path avian influenza outbreak. And so so they've appealed to federal court, the Federal Court of Appeal. Both of them said they wouldn't block the cull. Now it's gone to the Supreme Court, and it's, of course, blown up on social media, and even in the House of Commons, the Conservative MPs were questioning the government why they calling for an explanation of why this cull was necessary. So, yeah, like you said, it's amazing the amount of passion that people have for this situation, and often, well, it's a complicated situation, but information isn't always fully understood from all sides, it feels like. And so we'll have to wait now. Supreme Court has given CFIA until October 3rd to respond. In the meantime, companies, people working on site, CFIA inspectors are getting threats, and there's been reports of death threats to some of the businesses involved and that type of thing. So certainly, my opinion on this is that we should care about each other as humans, maybe at the same level that people are caring about these birds.
Yeah, these 400 ostriches, I think, have named at this point, Evan. It's interesting. I was in a meeting earlier this week talking about advertising in RealAgriculture, and in that meeting, it was like, okay, well, yeah. Before we get started, how about the ostriches? What do you think about that? Like that's the oxygen in the room. This topic is taking up, Evan.
Yeah, I'm going to be pretty blunt here. If this wasn't a cute little ostrich and this was a chicken or any of the other avian issues we have, this would have ended before it started. And people might not like me saying that, and the influencers are not going to like me saying that, but all that's happened with this one is it got time to brew, and then they got social media involved. And once you get the influencers involved, now you've got a storm. And that's where the Supreme Court's holding back on this, is they're getting enough of the negativity from just the feed and the length and stretch of this, that this is where it's going to take time. And the actual honest answer should have been, with a disease like this and the risk to the food chain and risk to food preparation and production, it should have been handled in day one.
Kelvin, is that criticism of CFIA? Because I've heard this from multiple people, that's where some of this criticism lies, is how slow CFIA acted here on this policy.
I think when there's a debrief after this, whatever happens comes to an end, the debrief, the takeaways for CFIA are likely, we need to act quicker. And that is Canada's policy. That is many countries around the world follow this stamping out policy because it's required for market access, it's required for keeping other poultry safe, that type of thing, with nasty diseases where there is no treatment, like avian influenza. And so I think they tried to be accommodating here. They tried to work with the farm and its supporters. And if we can call it a farm, there's questions about what the purpose is of these animals too, and whether that's all been transparent. I think they tried to work with the people that were opposed to it, and in the end, it's escalated and mushroomed into this massive issue that you're having conversations all over the place on the street in meetings this week, where the ostriches are coming up. So,
and if it's about the farm, I mean, we have ad hoc payments, we have agri-stability, we have items in place to protect the farm, but I don't think it's about the farm anymore. I think it's about the birds themselves.
There's compensation of, I believe it's $3,000 a bird that they would be eligible for, or could be eligible for, if and that's the case with all these farms, and that's actually a budget concern, I think, at Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada or with the CFIA in terms of the sustainability of this with this ongoing avian influenza outbreak and the payments that are required when farms are required to euthanize. But again, this has happened on over 500 other farms already. Why is this farm an exception, and why have they allowed it to drag out like this? I think there's going to be there should be some scrutiny around that as this comes to closure or comes to a head.
Yeah. Well, okay. So before we have to end the show here on Rural Radio, Kelvin, what is going on with our Toronto Blue Jays?
Man, we're talking about negative farm profitability. This ostrich euthanizing situation where they've had
real around here, Kelvin. It just can't be all
the Blue Jays season going off the rails.
No, I'm sorry. It can't just be all cupcakes and fluffy clouds, Kelvin.
We'll have to have Lindsay back to host next Friday.
I've been fired.
We have NFL and we have NHL preseason at the same time. This is like Christmas.
Well,
I don't even watch baseball.
And an epic college football slate this week. This is a great sports weekend. And the honestly, we haven't even mentioned the best sporting event that is on this weekend is the Ryder Cup. That is on my bucket list to go to. But
what about
crazy?
Prime Minister Carney met with Keir Starmer today, and they apparently traded uniforms for the Rugby World Cup final taking place tomorrow between Canada and the UK. Women's rugby.
That might be 6th or 7th on the slate. I thought you were going to say you're going to the Ryder Cup, and Carney didn't realize that they're not in the Ryder Cup. We're in the President's Cup.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well. Hey,
Evan, Blue Jays will find their bats yet. It's only uphill. They can only get better from here.
How about that home run from Varsho last night? That was
and better now than in the playoffs.
Yeah, Chip Flory was telling me this morning that the Blue Jays are, like, according to the betting sites, Blue Jays are like 6th favorite. Like, I don't even think Major League Baseball even knows the Blue Jays exist. It's just so anyway.
Aren't you in Arizona right now? Like, you watched the baseball over the Cardinals game last night?
Yeah, because the Cardinals suck. They really do suck. They do. Hey, we got to end up. We're going to do a bonus segment here. Kelvin, have yourself a great weekend.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Evan, always great to have you on here.
You betcha. Thanks, Shaun.
Okay, if you have any feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. Chat again next week. Cheers, everybody. Welcome to the bonus here on RealAg Radio and the podcast. Appreciate everybody downloading the RealAg Radio podcast, whether you listened on Rural Radio 147 or the whole thing through the podcast. We greatly appreciate it. Okay, so in the bonus here, Kelvin, what did we not talk about this week?
Well, we covered, I think, some of the real big overarching issues. And I would say maybe on the trade front, we saw the Prime Minister meet with the Chinese Premier in New York City as part of that UN summit. It seems this is summit season. Carney really enjoys going over to Europe, it seems like, or going to these international events. But he met with the Chinese premier, and it sounded positive, and they even mentioned canola and the tariffs on ag commodities in the readout after the meeting. So another sign that things are maybe that it's not completely cold in terms of the Canada-China relationship and talks in terms of trying to resolve that. Of course, after we saw Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe and Cody Blois head over to China a couple weeks ago, so things are they're still talking and trying to come to a resolution there. So I guess that's positive. And related to that, we saw FCC this week come out with a report on diversifying Canada's agricultural exports away from the U.S. and a lot of focus on China and Europe in terms of other markets. FCC saying we could potentially increase or shift more of the balance too.
Yeah. The question I have is, we're going to have an interview with JP Gervais from Farm Credit Canada about that report that they released. I think they had a food and beverage conference this week that FCC hosted. Is that aspirational, or could it be a reality, Kelvin?
I think it's largely, it's more aspirational than reality. I'd say I think there's small things there's tipping point areas where government policy can favor more diversification in trade. And Evan alluded to investment in infrastructure earlier. Say government puts public money into reducing bottlenecks off the West Coast. Certainly that would tip more of our trade balance to the Asian markets, that type of thing. So, but at the same time, I think in many ways, supply and demand prices dictate where things flow. And if it's cheaper to import corn from North Dakota, South Dakota for feed mills here in Manitoba than it is to buy interprovincial corn from Ontario, we're going to keep doing that because prices, unless we want to regulate markets and force things to be more expensive, I think supply and demand dictate the way that trade flows.
Yeah, and anytime I see like interprovincial trade being one of those solutions, I'm just like, wah, wah, wah. Like I don't know.
There's a reason trade flows are the way they are, and often there's geographic factors that policy and even politics can't alter or can't overcome.
Yeah, hey Evan, what's your thoughts on that in terms of Canada's opportunity to diversify its trade portfolio? What do you think?
I think we're posturing. Like, I think, don't get me wrong, I think there is definitely trade routes internally that we can improve and make better. Is that going to make up for our largest trading partner? No. Is that going to fix the commodity prices today? No. Is that going to fix them in 12 months? No. So I think we just need to be very realistic. And you can even go back to the environmental fight. Do we want to get sustainable? Do we want wind? Do we want solar? Yes. Can we do it today? No. Is it going to be a year from now? No. So I think the interprovincial stuff is just a posturing of take a picture, look good, and say the right things. Is it going to move the needle in the short term? It's not going to do a thing.
You know, I find that we sometimes forget how trade happens. So Canada is not China, where the government decides, who they're going to do business with as a country. It is individual entities, small, medium, and large, that are doing the actual trading. Now, the government can, lay the foundation and set up the context through trade deals and non-tariff trade barriers and market access, like those kinds of things. But from when it comes to the actual business part of it, it's not the government doing it. So the government can talk about trade diversification, but if I'm running some sort of a fabrication business in southern Saskatchewan and my biggest customer is in Montana, it's really, really difficult for me to be like, you know what? We need to diversify. Let's go to Brussels. That's just not happening. It's not reality.
Kelvin? No, exactly. And that's to me, ultimately, profitability and prices and supply demand dictate where you do business. And if there's ways government can get out of the way and reduce barriers or obstacles, but it's often just tweaks around the edges, not, like you said, in the actual world of commerce. And another thing we did miss was Canada signed a free trade agreement this week with Indonesia, the first of the Southeast Asian countries that we have a trade deal with. And it's certainly something that the Canadian Agri-Food Trade Alliance, Cereals Canada, I saw a few different farm groups come out with news releases appreciating and I think in many ways maybe a more symbolic nature of this deal than actual reality in terms of it being a huge market potential. I think it's the fact that our government is still pursuing lower trade barriers and market access as something that is worth applauding. Not necessarily that we're going to see a big influx of exports to Indonesia, but and also the Irish leader he met with Carney as well, right, Shaun?
I believe so. Yeah.
There was some commitment to actually implementing the Canada-EU trade deal with his country. So,
yep. Also, Conor McGregor is not running for the leadership. He's not running for office in Ireland anymore either. Did you know that? No,
I hadn't seen that. Surprising. This day and age, somebody with that name profile would likely be a front runner.
Evan, speaking of MMA, who do you consider the greatest MMA fighter?
There's another double-edged sword question.
Yeah, you just keep doing it. I'm gonna go St. Pierre.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'm going back. I'm old. I'm going way back.
Safe.
It won't get me. It won't get me slammed in Canada. That is my safest pick I can do. Don't get me wrong. I love the old Chuck Liddell and all those other areas, but for me, I'm going to go St. Pierre. And he never got his due. Let's be fair.
That Chuck Liddell's going way back.
Oh, I'm old, Shaun. I am not a young man.
How do some of those, like some of the OGs, the originals? Because I love fight night. Like I love a night where there's a big UFC event. Like I always loved boxing. Like I love it. I would say my wife is the opposite end of the spectrum. She hates when I have it on, but I love it. Toe to toe battle. How would those OGs do in today's?
They'd be on the ground in 30 seconds and it would be over.
I thought you were going to say. Okay, I was wondering if you were going to say that.
Now, can I take it somewhere else? Because if you want the real OG fight,
yeah,
I want Probert and Ray. That's what I want.
Oh, we don't do that anymore. Hockey is not a physical game.
I don't care. That's the OG. That's what I want.
Yeah, I know. I went to Lethbridge Hurricanes home opener last Friday. Had a great time with my father-in-law. We went to the game. It was a great game. Hurricanes lost in a tight game with the Hitmen, but it was a lot of fun. But there is no physicality whatsoever in hockey anymore. We have done everything possible to remove it. And when people do get angry and they do get physical, penalty. Yeah, I can't do that. Like football and UFC fighting are pretty much the only sports where physicality and intimidation is still very much a fundamental part of the sport. I don't know what's happened to hockey. Anyway, Kelvin, what are your thoughts on that?
So I've got daughters that play hockey, and we're actually seeing the opposite trend in female hockey right now, where female hockey is rougher than people expect.
Yeah,
watch the WNBA.
Oh, yeah, that too.
Yes, the WNBA.
That's a good point. So it's kind of refreshing, but I agree that is the overall trend, especially at the elite levels of hockey. If it's and our oldest daughter is getting to the age where body contact she's played co-ed hockey or played hockey with boys until this year, and this year she's switching to female only as it's body checking starts. But at the high levels, or at the more elite levels of hockey, no hitting. It's when you get into the lower levels where people are still trying to run each other. But it's the physicality is not what it and the again that fear the fear factor of it isn't there anymore.
Yeah.
And the part I like the most is for anybody who's going to have to go Google Probert, check out his stats in junior. He was an all-star.
Oh, he was great. Yeah.
That's what made hockey good is he could fight and he could score goals.
Isn't there like a Prime or Netflix show, like a documentary about Probert?
I think so.
Yeah.
He dude lived a full life. It
was short.
Yeah, but how much can you squeeze in? Substance abuse and partying and fighting and just wow.
The days before social media.
Tough as nails. Like remember those guys like Chris Nyland and those like there was a whole a generation there where now my father-in-law and I actually were talking about this. Like everybody talks about how remember hockey in the 80s, wide open, fast. Watch ESPN Classic and watch hockey from the 80s. It is senior men's. It is awful. It is so bad. There is no skill. The goalies are pathetic. No wonder Gretzky got so many bloody goals. The goalies didn't know how to move.
That is what was that email again? Shaun. You got to tell me that email again.
It was terrible hockey. It was bad.
Wow.
Bad. Remember when goalies used to just stand up and they didn't flop down? Yeah, they were terrible. They were bad. Yes, I remember.
Everything I just said today, Kelvin, I would have no emails because that line right there just cemented this.
Come on.
There's actually a parallel. We can bring this full circle here because what about farming like it's the 80s or the 70s?
Oh, see what he did there?
Yeah. He drew a parallel that I'm not going to go down because I just got out of I got out of the stove. I'm good.
You just got out of the doghouse. So if as we were farming none of us were, but just imagine farmers, maybe the audience has some thoughts on this. As we came out of the 70s into the 80s, as we were right about to enter the precipice of a really bad time for farming. What were the signs or the things that we could learn from that and apply that to today? Is there some connectivity we could take? I don't know. And I don't want to say that hey, right now it's as bad as the 80s because it's not. But just trying to learn from the past, and we talk about the 80s a lot. But what about that time period, those years just before? What was the writing on the wall? What were people thinking? What were people wish they would have done? All of those kinds of things. That's kind of a fact.
There are a lot of takeaways, and that's something that there's not many farmers around that still remember some of those, or a lot of our farmers are of our generation where we don't remember that, and I think there probably are lessons there that we could be looking at during times like this.
Yeah.
Well, and to be fair, I'm not saying there was indicators, and don't get me wrong, lots of people are going to say there's indicators today that it's going to happen again. I would say we have way more control over what we do as producers than they did back then, which means locked interest rates, 10-year rates, swaps. I mean, we have the ability to remove that interest rate risk that they didn't at that time. And 18% interest rates hurt a lot of guys.
Oh, yeah.
Let's remove that. Now let's go even further down the trek of what are we doing operationally? When it comes to all the things that happened, I do believe we have more mechanisms on the farm today to lower the risk mitigation. Land leverage. Don't be anything above 60 to 65 or 70, because if land drops 20%, which would be a massive collapse, you need that buffer with the banks. Because to be fair, if you're only leveraged 30 to 40% and land drops 20%, you wake up the next day and you're still farming. Nothing happens. That is a long-term wealth. And that's where I think farms miss, is that they believe that because of the land equity, they are rich. If you don't ever plan on selling the land, you're not rich, because the land's not going anywhere. You're never going to realize that gain, that 10x gain. And that's where a lot of guys misstep, is that you have a considerable amount of wealth, but because we legacy farm and we leave it to the kids and we don't want to burden them with more debt, you're never going to realize that. So it doesn't matter. It's just on paper.
Yeah, fascinating discussion. Hey guys, we gotta wrap it up here. I really appreciate it. We got some sports talk in, which I really appreciate. Tyler and Lindsay do not appreciate all the sports talk, and so we took advantage of their absence here today. Greatly appreciated. Hey Evan, have yourself a great weekend.
You too, Shaun. Thank you.
Hey Kelvin, all the best.
Thank you.
Okay, remember all the things that Kelvin said, everybody that you got really mad about, just send me an email about it. I'll deal with it.
Yep.
Haney at RealAgriculture.com. Have yourselves a great weekend, and we'll talk again next week. Cheers, everyone.